Hello and welcome once again to The Awakened Life with me, Mark Jansen, the Love Philosopher. I am so happy and excited to be with you today. I'm always excited, but today I'm especially excited because what we're going to look at today is one of the big questions. That's what I love, the big questions, and this is one of the biggest. It is, who and what is God? I'd like to start this question by just saying that it's one of the most important questions, and throughout the ages, so many people have died, so many people have suffered, so many people have misunderstood each other because of not understanding the answer to this question, who and what God really is. And if people fight and argue over who and what God is, it is clear as it is obvious they don't know what God is. Because if they did, they wouldn't fight, they wouldn't argue. What I'm going to share is not what I've read in books, but what I know from my own personal experience. I have studied about God, but more than studying, I seek to learn from personal experience. Because if you experience something directly, and if what you experience is profound and powerful and has an effect upon your life, you're not going to doubt it. But if you read something in a book written thousands of years ago, where there may not have been eyewitnesses, where we don't know if a person was writing their ideas about God, how accurate is their descriptions, because there was no evidence. So I always believe one's personal experience should be paramount in the spiritual journey. And nowhere is that truer than with understanding who and what God is. The search to understand who and what God is, I'd like to explain with an analogy. Because people use analogies to describe God, because God is so vast and so unknowable. In order for our tiny, finite minds to understand God, we use analogies. So here's one analogy of the 6 blind men and the elephant. You might have heard this, but I think it's an apt analogy to describe how religions are lost, fighting each other, trying to come to some understanding of what God is. So there's 6 blind men, and these blind men, they've been asked to describe what is an elephant. Now, each of the 6 blind men are around the elephant, but they're holding a different part of the elephant. So, for example, one is at the back of the elephant and he's holding the tail, and it's long and hard. And the blind man says, God is like a rope, because this, what I'm feeling, it's like a rope. It's long and hard. But another man is at the front of the elephant. He's holding the ear, and he's saying, no, actually, God is big and flat, just like the ear. But then another one who's on the other side is holding the tusk, and he's saying, no, God is long, hard, and smooth, because he's touching the tusk. And maybe another one is touching the tongue. He's saying God is not hard and smooth, he's soft and wet. The idea is, because they're all touching a different part of the elephant, they're thinking this is what the elephant is. And in a similar way, religions have understood one aspect of an infinite being, and so they base their understanding on that one small perspective. But because each of the men are blind, they cannot see the totality of what they're describing. This perfectly describes religions, because all religions are blind, yet they're trying to lead people. And as one famous shepherd, we could say, or carpenter, once said, if the blind lead the blind, they both will fall into the pit. So religion are like the blind men describing the elephant. They can describe part of it, but they can't describe it in its totality until they take off their blindfold, and then they can see what they've been describing is actually the same thing, but they're just coming from it from a different perspective. That's really important to understand. So before I describe and explain what God is, I'd like to explain, firstly, we have to get rid of a few myths, because these myths stop us from truly understanding the true nature of God. And these myths include the idea that, firstly, God is a male, secondly, God is a person, and thirdly, God is a spiritual being. These are all myths. The reason they're myths is because if we say God is a man, or God is a male, God is a being, these are all denoting a thing. A thing, doesn't matter if it's a spiritual thing, a thing is something that exists in time and space. But if God created time and space, obviously he's beyond both of them. So he cannot be limited to a thing. This is how God can be everywhere at the same time, omnipresent, because God is not a thing. But we can say God is everything. Or, more specific, we can say God is the creative energy of the universe. Now, I've studied all religions, and I would say the religion that perhaps comes closest to understanding this concept is Hinduism, with the concept of Brahma, which calls God the life force, or the energy, or the power that animates all life. It's not a personal deity like in the Western or in the Abrahamic religions. So we have this dichotomy of East versus West. In Eastern religions, God is this force, this energy, this impersonal energy from which all life springs forth. But in the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, God is a person, God is a king sitting on a throne. He's old and wise. But we have to understand, religions are full of metaphors, and especially speaking of God, because God is an infinite being. We can't understand him with our finite minds, so we use metaphors. We say he's sitting on a throne to show authority, to show power. We say that he has a long white beard to show wisdom, to show timelessness. But these are metaphors. God cannot be a person, for the reason I've just explained, because that would contradict God's attributes. We call God a person, as I said, it's like a metaphor. It's to help us. To give it another analogy, if you think when you're young, your parents want you to be a good child, and so they tell you about Santa Claus. And I've often felt that the concept of God in Western religions is what I would call a cosmic Santa Claus, or cosmic Father Christmas. The idea of Father Christmas is, if you're good, then Father Christmas will make a list and he will write down all the things that you've done. And then if you've been good, at the end of the year, you will be rewarded with a present. The Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all teach this God sitting on the throne is looking down on us, taking notes, writing down what we've done. And if at the end of our life, when we die and stand in front of him, if we've been good, we will be rewarded. Do you see the similarities? They are both ideas, stories to keep us in check, to keep us being good. And when you're a child, you probably need the carrot dangling on a string of Santa Claus to help you be a good boy and a good girl. But once you get past a certain age, you don't need to be bribed or motivated by Santa in order to be good. And in the same way, as we mature spiritually, we no longer need the idea of a person sitting on the throne who's going to reward us for being good. As we mature spiritually, we do good, we love, we serve, we have compassion and kindness for others, not because we want a reward, but because we've grown spiritually and we know that's how we should live. So that's why so many religious people have a misunderstanding about God. And because they think God is a person, they think if God is a person, he must have a favorite. You know, children are always asking. For example, I worked as a teacher and kids are always asking, who's your favorite student? Or my own kids would ask, who do you love most? That's human nature. And so each religion believes that they are God's chosen people. They are God's special people. You wouldn't join a religion who said, we're not God's chosen people, but join our religion anyway. You wouldn't join them. So every religion thinks and believes they are God's chosen people. But in reality, there is no chosen people. God doesn't have favorites. If we think of human nature, there was one Greek philosopher, Xenophanes. He said, if horse or oxen could draw, they would draw a god in their image. And that's exactly what we as humans have done. We anthropomorphize God. We give him human characteristics to make him seem like us so we can relate to him. The German philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach said, in the Bible it says, God created man in his image, but it's truer to say that man created God in his image. And I would agree with that. When we look at the holy books, especially the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah, it seems like we have made God in our image. And so in these holy books, it says that God can see, God can talk, God can walk. In the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, God has hands, and it really explains God in a very human terms. This was how people many, many years ago understood God, because they were simple. So they understood God as just like us, but stronger, more powerful. And if you look at Michelangelo's Divine Spark image, that's how people believe God looked, like an older, wise person. But now we're living in a time where we have to awaken spiritually. We can no longer stay in our state of immaturity. Now we're living in a time where it is important that we know precisely who and what God is. So what then is God? As I've said, God is the creative energy of the universe. God is this, you can say God is the one consciousness that exists. Now I'm going to get a little bit deep and metaphysical, but please stay with me. If God is the one consciousness that pervades all life, then why did God make all life? Now, in a previous video, I've spoken about the purpose of life, but I'm going to expand upon it a little bit more. God is the one consciousness that exists. When that consciousness, and everything, by the way, ultimately, we can say God is energy, but creative energy. But when that energy is vibrating at its highest rate, it is what we call infinite love. That is what God is, literally infinite love. In order to know itself, God created this reality. We can say God created this physical universe, which is actually nothing more than a holographic simulation. This physical body that we identify with is an avatar. And just like you would use an avatar when you're playing a simulation game, a virtual reality game, likewise, God is playing one great big virtual reality game using our bodies as an avatar. So my friends, this may come as a surprise, but religions have actually not been truthful to us. In fact, religions have lied to us. They have told us that we are separate from God, that we are sinful, that we cannot connect with God, that we have to do penance, we have to pray, we have to fast, we have to do this to come closer to God. But this is not true, my friends. The reality is, when we awaken spiritually and grow spiritually and eventually become enlightened, we remember who we are. We remember that we are, and we always have been, the one consciousness called God, playing a game using this physical body in a kind of cosmic hide and seek game. The purpose of life on earth is not to make money, to be rich, to be famous. The purpose of life on earth is to wake up and remember you have always been the divine, playing a game of self-discovery, of remembering who you are. And when you remember who you are, you identify with the divine, then that is the purpose of the game. That is full enlightenment. I'll explain in more detail about full enlightenment in a later video. But I just want to emphasize that God is not, and I repeat, God is not something that is separate from us, which is what religions teach us. If we look at the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah, they all tell us that God put his spirit in Adam. This is symbolic, and it tells us that God breathed into the nostrils of Adam. This is just telling us that God put his spirit in Adam. Michelangelo's Divine Spark that has God putting his finger into Adam's finger is depicting the same thing. God's spirit resides within everyone. This is what we call the human soul. This is the essence of who we are. We are spiritual beings because we are part of the divine. In Hinduism, the term is Atman, which I think more accurately assesses our real self as a part of the divine. And so when we awaken spiritually, we remember and we realize we are all a part of the divine. We are all one. When we understand this, we no longer fight each other. We no longer hate each other. We no longer have division, lack, scarcity, and fear. This, my friends, is what religion and our governments and those who are controlling us do not want you to know. Because when we realize that we are one, all division, all hatred, all suffering will come to an end. So, my friends, in conclusion, we've been told a lie. We've been told that God is a separate entity from us, looking down on us, judging us, and the concept of God has divided people and had them fighting each other throughout history. But this is a lie. The purpose of life on earth is for each one of us to awaken spiritually, because when we do, we see through the illusion of physical life. We realize this is just a beautiful simulation game. The purpose of the game is to awaken. And when we awaken and realize who we really are, then life becomes amazing, because we realize nothing can harm us. There is nothing to fear. We are connected with everything, and we have infinite power. And when we connect with our real self and connect with our higher power, that is when life becomes really amazing. And that, my friends, is the awakened life. So I look forward to exploring this more with you as we awaken together, because as we awaken together, we will, as I always say, choose love. And when we choose love, we're healing ourselves, we're healing others, and ultimately, we're healing the world. And that is why we are here. I look forward to seeing you again. God bless.